no person has ever gone through the same incarceration at a stretch, not at a stretch, in different times, in two different times, on two different occasions. So if we consider the life of Malcolm X, for example, who was at the forefront for the black liberation movement in the United States, and if we study the history of Nelson Mandela, and for another person of repute who has undergone longer period of incarceration in his life is Alija Izetbegovic in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And if we observe and analyze the lives of these people, we can see that they have gone through prison life at a stretch. But as for Ustad Ma'dani, he has undergone prison life on two different occasions. First, he was allegedly involved in the Coimbatore blast case, and we have seen that he underwent a prison term for a decade, for as many as 9 years and a half. Thereafter, he was allowed by the court to go scot-free, proven that he is innocent of charges alleged against him. Again, he was on the second time he was incarcerated again on some baseless pretext, and this time the case is going on at a snail's pace without much movement, as is the case with all political incarcerations in the country under the dispensation, the present dispensation, which is more brutal and more lethal in its treatment of minority communities who are undergoing prison time in our country. So Ustad Ma'dani is undergoing prison time on two different occasions, and on two different occasions the civil society in our country has been indifferent to the pain and to the indifferent, not in the sense that they did not do anything. They actually they responded to the case. They signed under several petitions. They came on live in Facebook and other media, speaking to people, including myself. And some people has written good op-ed and everything like that. But there is no civil movement in this case, as we have seen in many other countries. This is not because the people are powerless, but the conditions in which our country has found itself is very apathetic. This is because there is no democratic undercurrent in our country in which a person has to undergo injustice for such a long period of time. If we consider the case of Abdul Nasir Ma'dani, we can see several things in the history of our country and in the history of Muslim societies in particular. For example, we can see in the history of Islam two types of ulamas. The first type of ulama is taking a compromising positions. That means they takes a kind of placating stance towards the government and the functionaries. They don't raise any kind of protest, but they do some kind of activism in the civil society and cultural sphere. And some kind of people, ulama, they take lucrative positions and lucrative chairs in our bureaucratic setup or cultural advisory setup. So that is one kind of ulamas in the history of Muslim communities. The other kind of ulama represents the dictum of Quran, which says that Amrun bil Ma'ruf wa Nahyun anil Munkar. That is, their role is to command to do good and to forbid against doing injustice or against doing all kinds of wrong. So there are many hadith in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that we should say not to the government and say not to the powerful, either with our hand or with our tongue, or we hate them mentally, or we hate them secretly, as just like that. The three kinds of responses are there, and what Madani Ustad has done is to speak, is to give his gift of tongue against all kinds of injustice that not only the Muslim community in the country, but the low-wage caste people, the subaltern community in our country has been undergoing for well over many years or for many centuries. So that is the problem, that you should not speak against the government, you should not speak against the injustice. If you are okay with injustice, then we will give you whatever positions that you are craving. So this has been the attitude of many repressive governments in our country for many years, not just after the freedom of our country, but even before the freedom of our country, when the British government was in power. So when the British government was in power, we have seen many number of ulamas at the forefront of national freedom struggle. We have seen the role, a very important role played by the Deobandi ulamas, people like Ashraf Ali Thanvi, Mahmud Hassan Madani, and other people who said that it is the duty of every Muslim in our country to fight against the British. So we have seen people like Maulana Muhammad Ali Jauhar and Shaukat Ali. They came forward to oppose the government. So I think Madani Ustad has been following this tradition of opposing the government, opposing not all governments, but opposing a repressive, unjust government with his voice for many decades. So he has been really a pain in the ass of the repressive social system. So that is the one thing that he has done. So if we say that, if Madani Ustad has taken a very compromising stand, if he agreed to placate the government, if he agreed not to ruffle anyone's feathers, he would have been in higher political and social or cultural positions. But he did not go after any of this. Rather, he raised his voice against the repressive power structure. Some people say that that was not an ideal position. He could have taken another stand, a gradualistic approach of social activism or political activism, but such a gradualism is applicable only where all communities have equal stands of representation, equal freedom of expression or freedom of choice or freedom of saying or expressing its own ethos in a very democratic manner. But after the freedom of our country, just like our freedom fighters imagined, what the country has witnessed is a kind of resurgence of ultra-nationalist fundamentalist groups which has been denying any kind of independent and what shall we say, dignity, an existence with dignity. Not just they are denying this not just to Muslims but to many other subaltern communities in our country. They have been denying this to Dalit communities. They have been denying this to many marginalized caste groups and many other people. the poor, the illiterate, the people who are living in forests, the scheduled caste people, Adivasis, people who are living in beach areas, the fisher folk. So, the repressive ultranationalist mechanism have been using the catchword of nation, which is a very imaginary, a very repressive formulation in their hand, to deny any kind of existence with dignity for all minority groups. I am not using the word minority here, but because it is a very problematic category, but all groups who have dignity, who have the right to exist in the in our country. So, Ma'dani Ustad has been assembling or gathering all marginalized people under one slogan, that is Mardidane Adhigaram. So, you should give power to the repressed people in our country. So, this is actually a clarion call of Quran to give power back to the people who were repressed. So, his struggle was at the one time liberation theological struggle, that is, he is actually taking the mantle of Quran of giving power, giving sovereignty back to the repressed people who come about the majority of this country. So, this is actually a kind of politics that will disturb the status quo of all people, not only the fascist ultranationalist groups, but also even the so-called secular formations in our country, who under the canvas of many secular or liberal formations have been functioning in a very surreptitious way against the interest of a majority of people in our country. So, Ma'dani Ustad's politics, it is not a politics of a shrewd tactician, we can say. It is not the politics of of someone who is trying to get some in his pocket, or trying to get some chair in one of the bureaucratic enterprises somewhere in our country, but rather he is taking or following the same ulama tradition that we have seen before, that we had seen before the independence of our country, the same Dayubandi stream of ulamas who fought against the British, who said that everyone should say no against the power that be. So, that is actually an organic ulama approach that Ma'dani Ustad was taking. So, how come he had such a viewpoint? This viewpoint emerged in Ma'dani Ustad's politics or his mentality, not from a ivory tower ulama context. He had rather a very subaltern context of growing up or brought up as an ulama. For example, he lived among the common folk. He was brought up among the common folk. He had the love and care and all sorts of veneration and respect from the common folk in our in the society. So, actually, he was addressing across all religions, across all castes, the aspirations of the repressed common folk in our society. So, that is what is expressed in the position that Ustad has taken in the society. So, of course, that would ruffle the feather of the society. But what I am trying to say at this point of time is not to retell the history, not just to retell the history of Ustad's political or social position, but I am trying to say that Ma'dani Ustad is actually waging a lone battle, because this is actually what the Muslim community has to take up. We need an existence with dignity, not merely an existence. So all that Ma'dani Ustad has been speaking for much long time, despite our criticism of his style. He might be using a kind of language which would offend, for which he himself has taken forgiveness or pardon from the society. Because why did Ma'dani Ustad apologize to the whole society for the style of his narration? Because he actually wanted maslahat, or a kind of welfare oriented society, because he does not want to offend anyone, he does not want to offend any community, he does not want to offend any religion. So if at all his words had offended someone, I take my pardon. That is a kind of maslahat. He is doing welfare of the whole society. But at the same time, he is saying that what I have been saying is not a lie. I have said any untruth. That is what Ma'dani Ustad has always wanted to convey. I did not say anything, any untruth. So what happened? All the issues that he raised have turned out to be relevant in the context of our country. We know what happened to Babri Masjid. We also know, came to know in the last year, before the corona outbreak, what happened in the form of Citizenship Amendment Act and National NRC and other laws, which they say they have temporarily suspended, but I am doubtful. They are making all taking all steps to surreptitiously prepare for a CA in the near future. No corona can ever defeat a fascist. What can defeat a fascist enterprise is a kind of coming together of all people across all religious and caste divides for a common stance of justice, a common stand against injustice, torture and repression. So whatever Ma'dani Ustad has trying to convey through his words has turned out to be true in one way or other. So Ma'dani Ustad has said that my style might be offensive to some extent, to a certain extent, but whatever I have said is true. So this is an eye-opener for the community. How long can we be indifferent to the travails and sufferings that Ma'dani Ustad has been undergoing for 2 consecutive terms of imprisonment? What could this community do to make him free, to come to his homeland, to serve the society, to be again a social reformer, a political reformer for our society, for our community? So this is what not only the students of Anwar Sheri, not only Ma'dani Ustad's disciples, but the whole community should be aware of. So this is what I have to convey at this point of time. So there are many steps. This is a legal process. In all these cases, they will go very slowly. That is what all the fascists in the world have done. They will never for example, in the Coimbatore case, there was actually the trial and he came out God's free, but 10 years of his life was lost. Then again 10 years of his life has already been lost in this okay, on this occasion. So this kind of a tardiness, slowness, delay, injustice is one form of repression. They don't want to persecute him, they don't want to kill him, but they want to slowly torture him, slowly repress him, not him. But this is a warning to the entire community. Never raise your voice, never raise your voice against the power, the repressive power, the fascist force, the ultra-nationalist groups in the country. So this is a reminder. This is not just a form of incarceration or torture or repression against Ma'adani Ustad. This is the repression of the entire community by way of a reminder. So this is a wake-up call. So the community has been getting many wake-up calls for the last 10 years after Narendra Modi came to power as the Prime Minister of our country on 2 occasions. There have been many wake-up calls, and one of the wake-up calls which has been continuing even before Modi became the Prime Minister. Another wake-up call has been there in the whole society, and that wake-up call is right now in Bangalore. That wake-up call, Ma'adani Ustad is not a person who is undergoing torture. He is the wake-up call of the whole community. It is the time that we should wake up from this sleep and work for the release of Ma'adani Ustad, which should be one of the top priorities for the whole Muslim community in India, at least in Kerala. That is what I have to tell you at this point of time. Thank you for listening to me. I am praying for Ustad. May Allah release him as soon as possible. Allahumma khallishu min as-sijn. Allahumma ufir lahu. Allahumma arhamhu. Allahumma shfi amralahu. Allahumma tawwil a'marahu li khidmati dinika wa dunya. ഇത്രയും പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ട് I conclude my words. Thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.